John, thank you for being here. Thank you all guys for being here. I'm going to give you an introduction to John. He's the co-founder and CEO of Apartment List. Prior of Apartment List, he worked at TICC Capital, where he invested in in internet companies and other technology companies. He also worked in investment banking in Thomas Weisel Partners and KeyBank Capital Markets in New York. And he graduated from Case with a business management degree and with a minor in finance. So let's give a warm welcome to John Codd.
Thank you, sir. Oh, well, you're a mic, right? I think, yeah, check. Awesome. And this is my remote. All right, the Idea Club. This is awesome. This didn't exist when I went here. I wish it did. This is awesome. How often do you guys get together?
At least once or twice a month.
That's great. Isn't it just started last year?
Yes, with the new name, it started last year.
I love that brand, Idea. Come on in, more the merrier. This is awesome. So thanks so much for having me. It means a lot to me. You know, my folks obviously are here in town. My dad graduated Weatherhead 74, so no big deal. And then my sister went here, so this is fun stuff. So I'm going to give you just a kind of a history of my background real quick. I'm going to roll through up until the present day, and then I'm going to give you some piece of advice that I found helpful along the way, and happy to answer, the second half of our session, happy to answer any questions you have. So this is where it all started. That's what those guys used to look like. Yeah, so this is, I'm born and raised in Strongsville. So lived there till I was 6. We moved to Hinckley, lived in Hinckley from the age of 6 to 9. And then we moved to Granger Township in Medina, Ohio. Raise your hand if you know where Medina is. All right, some people know where Medina is. All right, half of you don't. Gosh, all right. So moved to Medina, grew up there. That's my dad. He's right there. He'd hate that picture, so why don't we show that one? All right. So my dad worked at Chevy, General Motors in Parma, 38 years. Awesome career, building automobiles, which we love to drive. That's my mom and I. My mom is a teacher at Brunswick High School, taught learning disabled. Very patient, amazing woman. And this is my sister, who worked at the Cleveland Clinic for a very long time, and now is starting her own entrepreneurial endeavor, which we're all really excited about. So this is a bit of, I show these folks because they mean so much to me. That's a lot of my DNA comes from those three right there. I went to Highland High School, so I graduated with my grandparents, Lil and her. I was an athlete, so I did some sports. I did president of student council, president of the class, things like that, and I wanted to continue that at Case Western Reserve. And so most of you probably did a college search. We did a drive down Euclid to Case Western search, and I applied at like a handful of schools that I had never visited and then just went to Case. And so it made it pretty easy to get through. Well, you know what's interesting about this? I ran for freshman class president and won, but this is my campaign flyer. We have to clean up campus, but I didn't actually know what campus was like because we only been there like 4 days. So I was involved kind of in some of the student government, played football here for Coach Debelak there in the back, and was in a fraternity here on campus. So tried to stay really involved. I was really passionate about a lot of stuff. I was a track guy. That's not the type of form you're supposed to have for running track. One day, graduated. Look how happy Dad is. He's so happy. It's like he could stop paying the tuition payments. And then I as Luis had mentioned, I got a job at KeyBank Capital Markets, downtown Cleveland. And it was a 2-year rotational program in key corporate investment banking. I don't know if they still have it, but the first year, I ended up working in kind of commercial banking and debt syndications. And we were basically lending money for large real estate projects. And it was interesting, but it wasn't as exciting as I wanted to pursue from like a finance standpoint. I was really more passionate about investment banking. I was really fortunate to get put in the equity capital markets group my second year and leveraged a lot of that experience to move to New York City. But one of the deals I got to work on was an IPO for a company called Warren Resources. IPO'd, I think, in 2004, and ended up, going to Wall Street, hitting the button at NASDAQ, hang out in Times Square with management company. I was like, this I could get used to. It's a lot more interesting. And I said, all right, well, let's see what it's like to work in New York City. So I worked at a firm called Thomas Weisel Partners, moved to New York, spent a couple years there, and I spent 3 weeks training in San Francisco, and this is the only picture I have of San Francisco because I literally worked like 100-hour weeks, 3 weeks in a row. And this is my buddy Zishan. We went to the airport on the way to go back to New York. I'm like, dude, I have to see the Golden Gate Bridge. So we made the driver drive us over the Golden Gate Bridge and then to the airport. If it's any indication of how much you work in investment banking, there was a time when I once had hair as well. And said, to hell with this. I like this M&A stuff. I like equity offerings, but I think there might be something better for me out there. And decided to apply to a firm called TICC Capital based in Greenwich, Connecticut. This is a picture of Grand Central. I lived about 10 blocks away at 30th and 3rd, and then I would take the Metro North out every single day. And so I went from working kind of these 90, 100-hour weeks to working like 50-hour weeks. But I had a 3-hour round-trip commute, and I did that about a year and a half. And 3 hours, where you have a passive commute, don't have to drive a car, is a lot of time to kind of think to yourself. So I said, maybe there's something I can do with this spare time. And I started looking at real estate in Cleveland. So this is a picture of a good friend of mine, Justin McLaughlin, I've known for close to 30 years, believe it or not. And then this realtor, Sam, we started buying real estate in Cleveland. So bought a house in Bay Village, bought a house in Westlake, and I said, well, maybe there's a way that we could just start gobbling up houses in Cleveland. It's a good time to buy it at that time. And so I said, this is interesting, but it's not like exhilarating, right? It's not pushing the bounds of what I think I can accomplish. And I said, well, maybe there's something even more. Maybe I could build a website around, like a brokerage around real estate. And so this is my office in Greenwich, which is incredibly depressing. But when you get off that train, I started to like do all this entrepreneurial stuff on the train. So I had 3 hours, every single day where I could work. And then eventually, I started doing my day job on the train, and then I started doing my entrepreneurial stuff at this desk. But I didn't make it that far because I ended up quitting. I launched my first website November 17, 2007, and quit my job February 6, 2008. And this is a picture of that site. The original real estate brokerage concept was a tough one at a very tough time. So you're talking 08, that's not a good time to start a brokerage. I was able to attract some numbskulls to join me though. So this guy on the right, Chris Herndon, I've known for over 20 years now. So we grew up, spent the summers together in Kelly's Island, Ohio, if you've ever been there. I was a kid and my parents felt bad about me not having any friends. So what they said was, hey, maybe we'll have like a little softball game on the island where you can meet some kids. And Chris was the only one that showed up. So we ended up staying in touch first as like pen pals because it was before email. And eventually became business partners. So that's kind of the whirlwind tour of what happened those first 6, 7 years after college, after Case Western. Raise your hand if you've seen Wall Street. Man stares into the abyss, nothing stares back at him. It's at that point man finds character, which keeps him out of the abyss. One challenge that I had very early in my career is we had 100% revenue concentration with one client, which means every dollar that we made came from one person. So in the span of a month, that client had filed Chapter 11 bankruptcy. We only had like $5,000 left in our corporate bank account, and we weren't taking salaries anyways. We had one engineer on payroll. So I went to the bank, and of course, without hesitation, wired the remaining like $5,000 from my personal bank account. All my savings had been burned through over the first year starting the business. I wired that to our corporate bank account to make payroll for the one employee we had that was getting paid, and then he proceeded to quit a week later. So we had no money in my personal account, no money in the corporate account. We had no revenue, and we had no engineer. So times can be tougher than they are right now, but those are really the moments that really define us as entrepreneurs and as leaders. And you come out on the other end. So what we did, we pivoted, classic pivot situation. You'll hear people say that in San Francisco and talk about Silicon Valley companies a lot if you read TechCrunch. And we said, well, maybe there's something better than this real estate brokerage idea, which is miserable. And then we decided that there's a site we really like for travel called Kayak. You know, today's version, the 2014 version of it is probably a site called Hipmunk. If you ever use that, it's really awesome. But what we liked about it is meta search. So aggregating from aggregators, bringing all the inventory all under one roof. So I didn't have to search 10 different websites to buy a flight. I could search one and done, which happens to be their slogan. And so that worked. We were like, okay, meta search. That's not what works, right? This guy on a motorcycle? Who's this guy? This guy gave me the best piece of advice I got, like in all of 2009. We were trying to build this meta search business from the ground up, and we would have huge contracts with clients like apartments.com and forrent.com. And so what we had to do was build these relationships, but we kept kind of having, they would just basically stonewall us. We couldn't get them on the phone. We would try cold calling. And this is my buddy Nick. I've known him since 2003. I spent the summer in Hawaii when I graduated from Case, actually, which I totally recommend. And I met this guy there. He's quite the character. But Nick sells rat poison. And selling rat poison is kind of a tough business. But he does it by getting on the road and getting in front of people. And I said, I was telling him about the problems we were having. And he said, and how much money could you potentially make off one of these contracts? And I was like, I don't know, 7 figures annually. I mean, these are big deals. He's like, and you won't get off your ass and fly and take those guys golfing and steak dinners? And I said, you're absolutely right. That's exactly what we need to do. And that's really when our business took off. So we started, we got a proper office with some proper engineers, and we started flying around, meeting with all these clients face to face, and really started to build this meta search model. You know, the business continued to grow. It started as vertical brands because we weren't sure what we wanted to be when we grew up. We thought that, hey, maybe there are more concepts besides just apartments. Maybe we can try this in jobs, like a company like Indeed had done. Maybe we could try this with automobiles and used cars. And so the team grew bigger and a little bigger. And then we said, well, maybe we're getting in over our heads with trying to do so many categories. What if we just focused on building the world's most extraordinary rental experience? And that's when we hatched up the idea of Apartment List. And we said, what we need to do is we need to have the best supply in the United States. You need to build liquidity. Liquidity is where the demand meets the supply. Demand is myself. I'm a renter. Probably a lot of you guys are renters since you're in college. On the supply side, that's the ownership groups, the property management companies that are out there. And so we built online tour booking and real-time availability and built a scam-free website. We went in and we shot apartment buildings with photosphere cameras. So think Google Street View for the inside of an apartment building. We figured out how to get ratings and reviews and 3D floor plans onto the site. And eventually, what we want to do is digitize the back half of these transactions. So not only do you own the liquidity, but you also facilitate that transaction, digitize the application process, the lease signing process, and ultimately get into the payment flow. So renters see the Apartment List brand every single time they pay their rent. And so to do that, we really streamlined the entire team on this one big endeavor. And the team got a little bigger, and the team got a little bigger, and the team got a little bigger. And then we did $17.3 million in revenue in 2013. And it was a collection of these meta search sites, but predominantly Apartment List. And so we were fortunate to be named to the Inc. 500 fastest growing companies in America. And then we said, if we're going to do this thing all the way, we might want a little more firepower. So we brought on, we spent some time talking to firms in Silicon Valley and finally stumbled across these two jokers who I really love, Dana Stalder and Josh Hanna, partners and now board members at Apartment List, but they decided to give us $15 million to help grow the business even faster. And so we took that money and we put it to good work. We were in the press, spent some time on the television. We're now close to 3 million renters across the United States using Apartment List products. 2/3 of our visits are mobile. We have the highest rated iPhone app for rentals. Feel free to download it, play with it, give me some feedback. And this is our team today. So that's the whirlwind tour of Apartment List from then till now. And you know, I'm proud of what we've accomplished, but I think that we're just scratching the surface of what we can do and our potential. And I think you'll all find in your individual careers that your acuity will grow kind of exponentially as you identify more opportunities and are immersed in creating your businesses. That's why this organization sounds so incredible to me. I really wish something like this existed, because maybe I would have had the courage to take the step into entrepreneurship at an earlier age. I was 28 when I made the leap. So I'm going to give you guys just some advice that, take it or leave it. It's something I wish somebody would have told me when I was sitting in your chair. A lot of people come up to me and say, I don't have a good idea, and that's fine. Like, you don't need a good idea. Like, the classic example I like to use is, hey, I'm happy to start a dry cleaning business, and that dry cleaner can just be the most efficient, effective, well-executed dry cleaner in Cleveland, Ohio. And then I could just take that model and replicate it in 1,000 cities. And then I'd have a really amazing business. You don't have to create the next Instagram to have a really amazing career as an entrepreneur. There are plenty of businesses that are archaic that need innovators like yourselves to take them to the next level. Find co-founders. I'm a firm believer in finding somebody to work with that you really respect, admire. Somebody who's not necessarily the overlap of you. You don't want to look at them and feel like it's a mirror image of yourself. Frankly, you want somebody who complements you, who brings skill sets to the table that you might not possess. And I found that. I was very fortunate to find that in Chris Herndon and Chris Erickson, who's our COO. They both went to Stanford Business School together, and they're tremendous assets to Apartment List, and we wouldn't be the company we are without them. There's going to be some dark days. You're going to want somebody to talk to in those dark days. You're going to want somebody to celebrate with on the good days. Early hires are going to dictate culture. I wish we had this pool party. I just thought, found this picture and thought it might work. We were fortunate to have some really awesome people that joined us early on, because you'll very quickly become, when you have 4 employees, you're 1/4 of the company culture. You have 10 employees, you're 10% of the company culture. You don't have an outsized piece of the culture. You set, I think you put the fundamental structure in place and how the organization is going to be run, but it's all about the people, and those early hires are absolutely critical to get right. Visualizing your success, like, this is something I think most of us do. I do this probably 100 times a day, but like, visualizing your success means, pick the socks out, buy the socks that you're going to wear on IPO day. Do that. Put a picture of the house you're going to buy your parents in your wallet. When you have your first round of secondary 5 years from now. Whatever it is that you need to visualize that success, start doing it today. And so I'm a big fan of bulletin board material. Play sports, if there's a player from the opposing team who might have been talking trash about you, coaches would say, all right, we're going to use this to our advantage. We're going to put it on the bulletin board in the locker room. It's going to get all the players riled up. Well, one of the biggest companies in our space, a company called Trulia, the CEO came in. He's a really nice guy, Pete Flint, and I don't think he did this intentionally, but he came in, kind of sat in our office, and was talking about partnerships. And he said to me, well, John, it's a 2-horse race, really. And he was talking a race between him and Zillow, which meant that we weren't in the discussion. And I took that personally, and I think as most entrepreneurs would. And then I had it written up, and it's on my wall in my office. So every single day when I come in, and I didn't really need any extra motivation, but I appreciated it, because when you dig deep down and you are working those long hours and you need some motivation, it's always there. So get yourself some bulletin board material. Be humble. I mean, we're trying to do some exceptional things at our business, and I'm sure you guys already are or will. I run across a lot of companies that think they are the next big disruptor, and then they go out and they act like it. And that's not the approach that I would take. I personally like to let our business do the talking rather than the people do the talking. So be humble. Everybody's heard of practice makes perfect. I actually would take that a step further. I would say perfect practice makes perfect. Spend the extra time getting that pitch right. So you're going to pitch an investor on your idea. Practice for 100 hours, literally. Don't stop until it's perfect, and then go in front of those investors. Don't half-ass this, because once you go to school, it's not like getting a grade. It's like your business. This is your life, and this is a reflection of you. You have to be the best. Credit, you can accomplish amazing things if you just don't care who gets the credit. Admitting mistakes is something that's really hard for me personally because I make a lot of them. So it's really having the courage to say, you know what, you're absolutely right, I made a mistake. How can we take the next course of action? This sounds simple, but it's difficult to do in practice. But it's hugely motivational to the people around you when you admit when you're wrong. And optimism versus realism. I'm very optimistic by nature, and so I always think everything's going to work out just the way I want it to, which is great when you're kind of trying to run through brick walls and get something from 0 to 60. But if you start making decisions in your business as an optimist rather than a realist, if you start gambling on like, hey, I know this is going to be successful, so we're going to hire 20 people to build that, then you can get yourself into trouble. So I try to make decisions as a realist, but maintain optimism, especially when I'm talking to my colleagues. Never underestimate your competition. I don't care how old their business is or how long they've been around the block. Like, I can make fun of Craigslist all day, but they eat our lunch for liquidity. So you have to give respect to the people that have blazed that trail before you, and they've built amazing companies, and it puts you in a stronger position, especially with your colleagues, when you give respect to the competition that's out there. This is something I like to say, your business ideas, it can change the world one day. It doesn't need to change the world day one, which gives me a sense of calm because I have time. I put this 2064, it's 2014, right? Like, run your businesses as if you're gonna be running them 50 years from now. And that's a crazy notion, but for every Instagram, there are 10,000 companies you've never even heard of. And if you're trying to optimize for that 0.0001% outcome, that's a noble enterprise. You should. That would be great. You should be aspirational and do that. But I made decisions as if I would be running this business a shorter time period than 50 years. And when you do that, you end up regretting some early decisions that you make, especially in that first year or two. And so when you are building your companies, make sure you're taking a long-term approach, not this, hey, I'm going to exit, I'm going to sell my company in 2 years to Google. And I'll leave it with balance. I think balance is very important. For me, that means nonprofit work. So I spent a lot of time with an organization called Year Up in San Francisco. Used to spend a lot of time with Case Western. I was on the Alumni Association for back-to-back terms. I termed out. They're like, we don't want to see you, bald guy, anymore. Ended up, I spent a lot of time with the arts. Like, for me, I love music. So I take singing lessons every week. I started guitar lessons 2 weeks ago. Pretty terrible, but I'm working on it. Athletics, try to do something healthy, stay healthy. I'm running my first marathon. I've never done that. I used to be a sprinter, short distance guy. So I'm doing that in 7 weeks. And family. Family's here, right? Spend time with family every chance you can, and significant others, because there's gonna be a lot of hard days when you're starting a business. And finally, work is your balance, right? Love what you do, and then it's fun to go to work every day. And so it's really important to maintain that balance, or else things can derail pretty quickly. So that's a little bit about Apartment List. Thanks, guys. Happy to answer any questions anybody has. Yes?
Just I'm going to give you the microphone. Just if you can tell your name, your program, and the question, that would be great.
Hi, John. I'm Tom. My undergraduate major is finance, and now I'm in a master of finance program in Case Western University. I know you also majored in finance in Case Western, and I'm working because I know most of the entrepreneurs of the technology companies in China or in America, most of them know much about software programming or technology, except someone like Jack Ma, who don't know much, but most of them know much. So I'm very confused. So you major in finance. So how? I guess you do not know much about software or programming.
Right.
So how can you establish a technology company?
Right. It's a phenomenal question. So just to paraphrase that, like, so many people in my neck of the woods have software engineering degrees. A great example is a guy named Pete Kuhlman, went to Case Western Reserve, runs a company called Optimism, incredibly successful company. He's a software engineer. Do I wish that I was a software engineer? Absolutely. Did I benefit greatly by going into finance? Absolutely. So you have to pick where you're going to spend your time. For me, like getting that finance pedigree and that foundation was really valuable because I was working on really big deals, working on IPOs. You guys saw pictures of that. You're running big meetings with coordinating between lawyers, other investment banks, companies, counsel. You are traveling. You're spending a lot of time like on the road and in high pressure situations, like, hey, build this model by tomorrow. And it has to work, right? Because we're presenting in front of the entire company. And so I took away like a great foundation there. And what I made sure of in our first hires was that I found complements to my skill set. So since I didn't have that technical competency, I just found people that did. And so you guys as like the future CEOs of your companies, you definitely want to build into your DNA the ability to attract and retain the most talented folks that you can find. You are going to be the #1 recruiter for your business. You can never hand over the reins to anybody else. It has to be you, or else your company isn't going to be able to grow. And so I think that if you're early in your college career and you have the opportunity to start taking some software classes, if I could go back and do that, I would. Are my kids going to be software engineers? I think so. However, like the tools that I walked out of Weatherhead with were so valuable to me being successful in finance that I came away with a completely different skill set that's completely applicable, especially when you're the CEO. So I think it comes down to if you have those opportunities to kind of speak the language, that's awesome. If you're already like far down the path like I am, I'm not going to go learn Ruby on Rails or Objective-C, maybe in another life. And so I'm going to make sure that I know the lead kind of iOS engineer in San Francisco and take him out to drinks a lot so that when I need to recruit him, he's there for me. So I think kind of make sure that you can find a complement is important.
I'm Tori, and my question is just, can you talk a little bit about the decision to start your company or be located in San Francisco?
Sure. Sure. So born and raised in Ohio, till age of 24 I was here. So I think I had flown on a plane one time before the age of 22, maybe twice. Not counting like that small commuter plane up to Kelly's Island. So I was pretty sheltered from an adventure standpoint. I was like, all right, I'm gonna do something drastic. And so for me, that was moving to New York and just like right in the heart of it, living right by the Empire State Building, working on Park Avenue. That's kind of like how I started spreading my wings. For me, San Francisco, I actually didn't care. I thought long and hard about staying in New York. I eventually decided it was too expensive for me to just stay there with no income, and I was just burning through my savings. And I ended up relocating to the West Coast, first to LA. I moved in with a significant other, and then I would fly up to San Francisco, where my eventual kind of co-founder was going to business school. And so I would hang out with her on the weekends and then sleep at the office in San Francisco on the weekdays. And I did that for about a year, maybe a year and a half. So that's a tough schedule. And so ultimately, I ended up just relocating to the Bay Area permanently. What were the reasons? I think there are a lot of benefits. There are a lot of benefits to being in Cleveland. There are a lot of benefits to being in San Francisco. I'll talk about San Francisco first. I think a rising tide raises all ships. So you are going to be immersed. Just think, if like every coffee shop you walked into was you guys, everywhere, in the whole city. It was awesome, right? Think how much energy there is in this room when you guys are all hanging out and working on an idea. Like, it's awesome. Like, that doesn't exist. It definitely didn't exist when I was here. I don't even know if we had much in the way of entrepreneurship. I don't even know if I knew what the word meant. So, like, we have this in every single coffee shop that I walk into. It's awesome. And then, So you start to have this network effect. You start to have this flywheel effect where everybody kind of compounds on each other. And so a lot of amazing entrepreneurs and engineers and business folks, they start to flock to San Francisco. And so I would just say it's probably, as far as talent pool, it's probably the largest talent pool, definitely in the United States. Worldwide, it's tough for me to comment. But I would say, anecdotally, maybe like 10 times bigger than New York City. And New York's probably like 5 times bigger than LA as far as tech scene. But that also means it's extremely competitive. And so you're like, that first engineer that quit on me, he works at Uber now. And I'm sure he's going to be a millionaire when Uber goes public next year. So you have Ubers and Yelps and Googles and Facebooks knocking on the door like every one of your employees. So you don't have a tight-knit company, strong culture, they're just going to leave. Senior, junior, it doesn't matter. So if you feel like you can, I also think you get an amplifier on valuation. Like a lot of venture capital firms, if you decide to raise capital, which we didn't raise capital until that round in November, a year ago. We literally bootstrapped. We raised, I mean, all told, like $1 million from angels in 4 years. We bootstrapped our way to 17.3 million. So you can definitely do that, and I can talk to bootstrapping as well. But for us, every time I talk to a VC now, and they have like a company in Nashville or a company in Columbus, Ohio, one of the investment is predicated on them moving to San Francisco to be in the Bay Area. Okay, so those are some pros. Those are some cons too. Extremely competitive. People are going to be poaching your engineers. Like pros of staying here, cost of living. Cost of living is probably like 40% of San Francisco. It's unbelievable. A one-bedroom apartment right now in San Francisco is like $3,200 a month. How insane is that? You could have the nicest like house in Bay Village for $3,200. Cost of living is huge. So your operating expenses will be extremely low if you keep the business here. Buying clicks on Google and marketing there is the same cost anywhere, but your overhead's going to be a lot lower in Cleveland. I think there's a smaller talent pool to pull from. You know, you've got Case Western's awesome, John Carroll's awesome. Like, there's some great schools around here, right? It's smaller just because we don't have as many. The population's not as great, but there's less competition too. So, you know, maybe you're competing against the Cleveland Clinic for a software engineer, and you know, maybe that's a bet that you'd be willing to take, right? Because you can coerce somebody into joining you when you're just 1 or 2 people. And I think if you build a tight culture, it's going to attract other really talented people. So that's one of the big benefits. I think from a downside, like if you do pursue professional venture capital, it might be a little more challenging here because they'll be like, why are you in Cleveland and not San Francisco? Because they want you to gain from that flywheel effect I had talked about earlier. That's just one downside. You know, I think those are some examples.
My name is James, second year MBA. I was hoping you could tell me a little bit more about when you did decide to go out for capital, a little bit more about what that search was like and how you eventually partnered with Matrix, I think it was.
Yeah.
Like what kind of drew you to them, or what drew them to you, like how you kind of found each other and all that?
So somebody once told me finding your venture capitalist is like getting married, but you cannot get divorced. So they can divorce you. They can kick me out. So how did I go about that search? I was under the impression that, hey, let's just cast a wide net, because who cares? We'll talk to like 50 firms. I had a list of 50 firms, and I tried to talk to 50 firms. It's a huge time commitment. So first off, like your co-founders or whoever else you team up with, you're going to spend a ton of time. So your business is going to like slow down. And if you're a small company, it's going to grind to a halt because you're not going to have time. So what I would recommend is you spend more time kind of upfront than we did and just research, hey, these are the firms that I'd potentially be interested in. And it helps to start building those relationships casually before you need money. And so I used to always just kind of give these guys the Heisman and say, like, we don't need to talk to you. We're good right now. Your head's down. Why don't we check in next year? and I wasn't rude, but I was curt, right? And I was just, I could have done a better job of building relationships from an early stage and figuring out who might be good partners, because you eventually are gonna work pretty closely with, like, those guys, Dana and Josh. I could text Dana right now, he texts me back in 5 minutes if I need something. Or if he needs something, I text him back in 5 minutes too. And so when you enter that type of partnership, you really wanna know the people before you just pull the trigger. It's not just about money. If you can't raise capital, it's difficult to raise capital with your business model. Maybe there's something wrong with your business model. Or maybe you just need dumb money, which Matrix is not dumb money. They're incredibly intelligent. The alternatives are, like, sometimes there are smaller shops that maybe don't have a core competency in your area of expertise in the type of business you're trying to build, but they believe in you and they'll write a check. So there are people that add value to the business and to the operators that have been founders before, and then there are people that maybe haven't done before and can't give you a ton of advice about that. And so you really want to figure out what type of money you're going after, and then once you figure that out, I would really narrow in on which firms could potentially do it. Like, if you're raising healthcare venture capital, don't go talk to Excel. Don't talk to Matrix. They're just never going to write you a check, and it's going to waste your time. And the other thing that's going to happen is rumors will just kind of spread when you're raising money. And so then you're going to get a ton of inbound interest on top of that, which can play to your advantage from a negotiating, like, leverage standpoint. But just be cognizant that that's going to happen, so it can be a huge time sink.
How do you manage, because I'm sure that you still do have to manage that, your inner voice when it comes to, see so many smart people around you with, deeper pockets than you have, bigger connections, networks and stuff like that. How do you actually manage that?
Yeah. First off, check your ego at the door. Check your ego at the airport, whatever it is. Like, that's tough because you guys are all big fish right now, right? Everybody here is, like, doing something kicking ass, I'm sure. I'm, like, never the smartest guy in the room, any room I walk into in San Francisco. And I like that because it gives me an opportunity to learn more from the people that are around me. It keeps me hungry because I constantly see people that are doing, like, amazing things. And it really kind of opens my eyes, and it changes our company trajectory because I can go back and take the lessons that other people are learning, and I can apply those at Apartment List.
From a competitive thing, I mean, you're like, these guys are so much smarter than I am. I mean, how am I able to,
So hey, maybe they got a higher SAT than you, but it doesn't mean that they're better at you, like, in motivating your troops. Or it doesn't mean that they work harder than you. Because I might not have been the smartest guy at Thomas Weisel Partners, but I was sitting next to guys from Yale, Harvard, Stanford, Columbia, but I worked way harder than any of them. And I had better attention to detail, and I was smart enough to get the job done, and so my work was always exceptional, right? Or I hoped it was. So I wouldn't put it in front of anybody unless it was. And so I would take what you are strong at, and I would continue to, like, round out those skill sets, and places where you think you can do better, I would start to identify what those are. The hardest part is just identifying, man, I suck at statistics, and I'm starting to use statistics a lot. I should probably spend some more time working on it. Or, gosh, like, I'm not doing a good job of selling our company to Ruby on Rails engineers. I need to, like, refine my pitch. I need to spend 100 hours practicing it and be the best at it. So I try to take those areas where I'm the weakest. Like, my network was a weakness. So I lived in San Francisco. I didn't know anybody except, like, 2 dudes that went to Stanford. That was a good place to start, by the way. And you know something about that? Yeah, so I ended up, I've probably grown the network. I don't know, I can email, like, 100 CEOs right now of cool companies in San Francisco and get a response pretty quickly about, like, hey, do you want to grab drinks this weekend? And that just takes work, and it takes, 4 years. When you move cities, you start from scratch, kind of from a network perspective. When I moved to New York, I had no network, but I was working 100 hours a week, so I couldn't even build one. And then when I moved to San Francisco, like, I made it, like, a conscious decision that, hey, it's going to help our company if I'm better and more recognizable and more visible in the community. And so I was proactive about it. So I would just say, check your ego, identify your weaknesses before other people do, and then start to sharpen them, because you can definitely gain ground very quickly. Yep.
What was your
Flash starts. That's the, who runs Flash starts again?
Jen Charles.
Yeah, that's great. I hear good things about Flash starts.
Yeah, I probably went through it last session.
Very cool.
Yeah. How do you make the decision to go like remote a distributed team versus having engineers in-house, or not in-house per se, but with you in a physical location?
So I've gone both routes. It's a great question. So should you hire people in Croatia or Russia or Brazil or Philippines to be your engineers? I failed 3 times at that. I tried on 3 separate occasions to hire outsourced teams that would work on dedicated projects for us. The one version was engineers, didn't speak English. I had a project manager who spoke English, who was the intermediary, and it was a game of telephone. Like I had to tell the project manager what I needed. He would tell the engineers. They would kind of do something. Maybe it wouldn't be right. He would communicate back to me, and something was always broken. And maybe it was just like, it was always like C+ work. It was never like A+ work. I tried other strategies where like outsourced, but in the United States. So they were lower cost of living cities in San Francisco. It's obviously like, don't pat yourself on the back for recruiting like outsourced engineers. Anybody can recruit somebody from like another country to be your engineer. Pat yourself on the back when you get somebody who's like in Cleveland, Ohio, who's a badass Ruby on Rails dev. Like that's awesome. Or if you're headquartered in San Francisco, get somebody to work in the office with you. What I found is you're gonna pay a lot more to have, even in Cleveland, like I looked at outsourcing everything to Cleveland 3 years ago, and the average like Ruby on Rails guy, 5 years experience, was making like 120, 130 grand. Those guys make like 150 in San Francisco. 22-year-olds in Cleveland probably make a lot less. And I don't know exactly what the new grads at Case make that are like software devs. In San Francisco, they're making 110 base salary. It's crazy. I made 38 grand when I graduated from Case. 110 base salary, 10K bonus with equity. So like they're expensive as hell. Here's our philosophy. Like you're gonna lose a ton in the communication breakdown. So if you can like just own that, then you can be successful offshoring. I've seen some guys that have offshored, not development, but other tasks to the Philippines with great success. Thumbtack is an example of a company that I know pretty well that's done a great job of that. I opted to have them in-house and pay the premium, try to outweigh the cost of the salary with maybe a higher weighting on equity. It might make it it'll align incentives that they'll want to stick around with a standard like 4-year vesting schedule with a 1-year cliff, so if they don't make it a year, they don't get any equity. Ultimately, we got really good at recruiting engineers, and I think that we had a bunch of like 22-year-olds too. We had a nice mix, and then we ended up figuring out that a lot of the 22-year-olds, while they were like super smart, like rock stars, we would get 5 times the amount of productivity out of somebody who was 5 years more experienced, and it was completely worth paying an extra 40 grand a year to the guy at 5 years experience. Because he would run circles around the 22-year-old. And plus they have like this experience of like they've seen 5 years worth of corporations that they've probably worked at, so yours is probably the coolest. Keeps retention high. It's not just about recruiting after a while, it's about retention. And you're gonna figure that out too, is you wanna manage that and make sure that you hire slow and you fire fast. And that might come across as terse, but that's what you need to do to be successful. Otherwise, you're going to have folks that just aren't a good fit. Doesn't mean they're not good people, just means they're not a good fit for your business.
So I'm not sure if I got this right, but did you say that one of your co-founders is a Stanford Business School graduate?
Yeah.
That person's not here right now.
No. Chris Herman, we want to talk about him behind his back? No, we've got, I think we've got 3.
The back is good, it's all good things, right? So.
Yeah. Is that your question?
No, so which one is that, at what stage in your, in the company, did this person really join you? And considering that he or she had whatever options he had, why did he really choose to do that?
Yeah, he's crazy. That's why. So let's see. Quick timetable. I started buying the real estate stuff in like July '07, and then I launched my first website November '07. Quit my job February '08. Worked on it by myself in New York City till that summer, and then I actually got Chris Herndon and Chris Erickson. You can look them up on our website. Sick backgrounds. Like Erickson was Boston Consulting Group. He was Northwestern. He was computer science major. 4 years at BCG. BCG, McKinsey, just kind of Bain are the big three, like management consulting firms, which would also be an awesome background from an operations perspective to build a startup. But and then he went to GSB for 2 years. He ended up going back to BCG for 2 more years after it. So Herndon and Erickson both interned the summer between their first and second year. And so that's another good place that you might be able to find like really talented folks, MBAs that might make good co-founders. It worked out for me. And then they went back to school. So we kind of dialed down their vesting, and then they would work maybe like 15 hours a week, and I was working like 100 hours a week. And I got paid. I had more equity because of that, and they had helped me raise capital. I never could have raised capital on my own. With like, friends and family around, we ended up raising 250 grand, which was 500 grand, and then decreased by half because the stock market crashed while we were trying to raise it. So without those guys, I never would have got the capital raised, probably never would have gotten incorporated, and they went back to school, and then Chris Herndon joined full-time when he graduated, and then Chris Erickson came back 2 years later. And they're both exceptional. Yeah.
What do you think is the most important thing that you learned in your entrepreneurial journey?
I would say that nothing is going to take the place of persistence. So whatever it may be, I just never gave up. And all of us could have sat in one of these conference rooms down the hall with a whiteboard and said, yeah, this meta search idea for rentals sucks for these reasons. Or like building a marketplace for rentals, it sucks for these reasons. I just didn't accept that. And so it played to my strength that I wasn't a big whiteboard guy, that I pontificate. I was a doer, so I would just say, you know what, I don't care what the whiteboard says, I'm gonna go. My gut tells me this is something I should try, I'm just gonna go do it. And I think that persistence or tenacity is something that was in my DNA for my folks growing up that I needed every ounce of to make it through like really tough times. So for me, that was my strength. Like figure out whatever your superpower is. Everybody's got one that's different, and everybody's got one that's unique, and it doesn't matter what the guy next to you has, but take that and use it because you're going to need it. You guys are entrepreneurs now. You're going to be building amazing companies. Things are going to hit the fan sometimes, and you have to always be able to overcome those obstacles.
Can you talk a little bit about dropping your larger ambitions for the company? Because you said you thought about making it bigger and incorporating a lot of things, but then kind of narrowing it down.
Yeah, so one thing that's very valuable as well is focus. And I'm like, attention deficit, is an understatement for me. So that level of focus that you need became very present when we were trying to build metasearch in a bunch of categories. We're like, okay, kayak.com for this, kayak.com for this, doon. And some of them had failed, some of them were succeeding. It's not the way to build an awesome company. It was the way to build a company we could sell for like $50 million, which is cool. It was awesome. Everybody in here would be like, that's great, and you asked me 10 years ago, that's great. But you're gonna find too, you guys are, we're not young anymore, right? I'm 34, I just turned 34. So you get like your 30s, you're gonna make like one big impact. If you can have one company that you run, I want it to be like something I point to is like everybody in the United States that searches for a rental uses apartment list. Like I want that to be the case, right? And you'll find out that whatever it is that you're so passionate about, that you gave up all of your awesome careers, you gave up management consulting, you gave up finance, you gave up your nonprofit, like whatever it may be, to go do it full time, like you want that reward of, and it's not a financial reward, it's like, did I make an impact? Did I make an impact on like this planet? And so we ultimately deemed that metasearch wasn't making an impact on this planet. But if we took all of our resources and we focused just on apartments, just on buildings, and then marketplace, which is really, really, really hard. Like anything you find that's really hard is worth doing because it means nobody else is probably doing it. And the stuff that's the hardest, that's what creates the most value for whatever your business is. And so for us, it was building that and then marketplace. And so it was hard to shut everything down. And to go along with that, like, I love like brainstorming ideas. When I get on like a plane, I just sit there and write stuff down. I had to like consciously shut that off because otherwise I'd be thinking about crazy stuff that's not going to help apartment lists today. So like you have to shut out the noise. Yeah.
One more question?
So it sounds like you've kind of covered a lot of these, but any other 50-year decisions? You said, try to plan for a 50-year company.
Yeah. Well, part of it is like I didn't think I was going to ask that question because it's 50 years from now. Nobody knows. What would I say? I think your cap table. Think about your cap table early on. So think about who you're partnering with. How much do you trust them? Do they match your enthusiasm for what you're building? Or are they a short-term employee or a long-term employee? Is it the guy that's building the prototype of your website? It's probably not going to be a good like CTO one day. So I would say matching characteristics and DNA of your hires with your own, but that complement you is important. And make sure those people are incentivized for the long run. So longer term like vesting schedules is always really important. Titles, like I think I had 3 CTOs. The first one was like a 21-year-old kid at the University of Texas. Like awesome kid, but not a CTO. And so when you need to hire a CTO, they say, well, you already had a CTO. Or if you had a VP of this, you're going to hire somebody at a director, which is below VP. They're going to say, well, you had a 24-year-old that was a VP. I want to be a VP. And then you get title inflation. And then you just got to manage to it. And if you're not, it's just something you have to build for the long term. So cap table, titles, salaries. Like in the beginning, it's just like a crapshoot. Like, okay, what's this guy get paid? I don't know. What was he making at KeyBank Capital Markets? I'll give him like a 20% discount, and I'll give him some equity. It's just this weird, trying to figure out what makes the most sense for the individual. But you pay the price for a lot of those decisions when you mess them up. So I'd spend a lot of time thinking about like, I talked to a company recently, like awesome company, awesome founders, and they paid there are 5 employees, they pay them all the same. And there's 4 engineers and like 1 marketing guy. And I'm like, dude, like everybody should make like different salary according to like how valuable they are to the company or equity compensation to outweigh it. And so like smart people can run into that too. You'll hear this term, technical debt. It means when you're building your product, the engineers, you're like, hey guys, we got to ship this thing in 1 month, all right? And I want it to be like, it's got to have all these features and it's got to work, and we're going to submit to the App Store. And they're like, holy shit, we got to build this thing right now. And then they go build, and what happens is you have a bunch of technical debt, which is a bunch of crap code that they had to put in there because they didn't have time to build it right. They're going to have to go back and fix one day. So there's technical debt, which happens all the time, happens at Apartment List today. Technical debt's being created because we're pushing. But you also have like business debt. And I'm not talking about lending. I'm talking about this weight that you have on your shoulders from like bad decisions you made when you were just starting the business. And so talk to like fellow entrepreneurs. You guys have an awesome network right here. Keep this, grow this. Like it helps to get this room bigger and bigger and like so spread the gospel of what's happening here. And it doesn't necessarily just need to be Case Western. I love the school. You guys love the school. Just get as many awesome, smart people in one room as possible, and you're going to have some really brilliant like discussions, and you're going to have some epiphanies that help change your life. So like, force yourself to kind of get outside that comfort zone. But those are 3 examples. I'm sure I'll think of more, but happy to chat more about it later. Awesome.
Well, John, thank you for being here.
Yeah.
Thank you for all the advice. This was great talk. And everybody give it up for John Cobb.